Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. On behalf of Ummatics, we welcome you to today's program. Ummatics is an organization, an institute established to give intellectual and spiritual framework that combines the intellectual and the spiritual together to create a framework for the advancement of Ummatic revival that is not centered on simply crude nationalisms, but is a framework that is built on the spiritual and moral values of an Ummatic vision for the future. To that end, tonight's program will focus on Palestine and Kashmir, two of the most pressing issues of the Ummah today. We are all aware of the ongoing genocide in Palestine, and we have been inundated with the imagery and the footage of the horrors that are being perpetrated against the Palestinian people. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant them permanent victory, an end to their suffering, and justice that they have worked for generations. Much less hidden as well, however, is the ongoing oppression and repression and suppression of the people of Kashmir. And this program aims to talk about how media portrayals, propaganda, and narrative building creates an environment which justifies genocide through the narratives that are useful to empire, not just by justification on from a direct sense, but to create a narrative that portrays particular actors as inherent threats and dehumanizes them, thereby devaluing their lives and creating moral hierarchies which place certain lives over others. We are very pleased to be joined by two illustrious figures, Dr. Azzam Tamimi and Ayyub Thakur. Dr. Azzam Tamimi is a British Palestinian Jordanian academic and political activist. He is currently a freelance presenter at Al-Hiwar TV channel. He headed the Institute of Islamic Political Thought until 2008. Dr. Tamimi has written several books on Middle Eastern and Islamic politics, including Power Sharing Islam, Islam and Secularism in the Middle East, Rashid Ghannouchi, Democrat Within Islamism, and Hamas, A History from Within. Dr. Muzammil Ayyub Thakur is the son of a very important figure in the Kashmir movement, Dr. Muhammad Ayyub Thakur, who was exiled from India from his homeland Kashmir for his incredible political activism. Dr. Muzammil was born in exile in Saudi Arabia and moved to London shortly after, and he's currently completing his education at London University, pursuing a career in finance and economics, as well as politics, international relations, political science, defense, and war studies. He is the president of World Kashmir Freedom Movement and the director of the Justice Foundation, Kashmir Institute of International Affairs. He is a prolific lecturer who has lectured on many topics, including South Asia, focusing on Kashmir and Pakistan and India, as well as influence of China and Afghanistan on wider regional affairs. He has been quoted and referenced by governmental and non-governmental organizations, diplomats, bureaucrats, as well as students, activists, and academics who write on Kashmir. He is regularly invited to international events to talk on the case of Kashmir and has had meeting with high-level officials such as the Turkish Prime Minister and President, the Egyptian opposition, the Malaysian government and opposition, the OIC Secretary General, and others. Inshallah, the format of the program will be a presentation by Dr. Azzam and a presentation by Dr. Muzammil, after which we will have a short Q&A.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wassalamu ala rasulillah, ala alihi wa ala. Grateful for this opportunity and thankful to the organizers for inviting me to address you on the Palestinian issue, especially at the time when it is probably one of the greatest tribulations in the history of the Ummah. Not just because the Palestinians are under the hammer constantly, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and this has been going on for now 16, 17 months. but also because they are surrounded by 2 billion Muslims who seem to be helpless, completely helpless, unable to stop the genocide, unable to do anything. And of course, if we focus on the vicinity, the Arabs, almost 200 million Arabs, completely useless. Egypt alone, 100 million, next to Gaza, not able to provide a drink, not able to provide a medical aid, not able to provide anything. But not only that, it is actually part and parcel of the siege process. Had it not been for the siege imposed on Gaza from the Egyptian side, probably this genocide would not have happened. When you study the history of Islam and look for similar, such very low points in our history, you might be able to find a few. So this is not entirely unprecedented, although it's very painful for us. But similar things happened before, when the Mongols attacked the Ummah and destroyed Baghdad and swept all the way to Asham, and then stood at the verge of conquering Egypt before they were defeated. What happened to the Muslims in Spain as well, and how a Muslim turned against Muslim, and what happened during the Crusaders' campaigns, when Muslim kingdoms turned against Muslim kingdoms and entered into alliances with the Crusaders. So the regimes of Sisi or Mohammed bin Salman or Mohammed bin Zayed have their precedence in history. Very painful low points, but nevertheless, those were temporary moments that then were overturned, and the Ummah was revived once again. It is the nature of this Ummah that it is self-reviving. And that's not because of the efforts of a certain human being, but that's because of a promise made by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah took it upon himself to preserve this deen. إِنَّا نَحْنُ نَزَّلْنَا الذِّكْرَ وَإِنَّا لَهُ لَحَافِظُونَ. And as part of this process of preservation, there will always be a community of believers in the east, in the west, in the north, in the south, here and there, willing to give what it takes in order for the Ummah to survive. And I think the sacrifices made by the people of Gaza is just that it's that example. People who will come after us in generations will look back and see in the model set by Gaza something miraculous, something heroic. So today, the picture is very painful. It's agonizing. You reach a stage when you are no longer able to watch news. But actually, on the medium term to the long term, what is going on today is definitely going to change the world. And part of this change is to do with awareness about what's going on. In the plight of the Palestinians started long ago, more than 100 years ago, almost a century now. Since the Ottomans lost that part of the world, because Palestine was an Ottoman province before it was taken by the British and placed under their mandate. So almost a century of struggle by the Palestinians, but a century of consistent attempts to conceal the facts of what is going on the ground. Now, if you go to any library, and I usually challenge students I address in the UK and elsewhere in Europe, to go to the library and check the details of history for themselves. You go to any library and check the history. The facts are there. Facts cannot be concealed. But so much effort has been made in order to divert people's attention away from the facts to the myths. The myths about the plight of the supposedly those who are supposed to be victims in this, although they are the aggressors, and the concealment of the important stages in this story, in this narrative. For instance, if you go to the library and check the writings of prominent historians, you will discover that the Zionist movement, which today rules in Palestine, is actually in its origins Christian, not Jewish. That's a fact of history. You will also discover that it's a fact of history that the Zionists in Europe were collaborating with the Nazis who were massacring the Jews, who perpetrated the Holocaust. They were actually working together because both sides had an interest in removing the Jews from Europe and sending them elsewhere. The Zionists didn't care where they went, but the Nazis didn't care where they went, but the Zionists wanted them to go to Palestine. You will discover as a fact of history that in the initial stages of Zionism, the majority of the Jews were opposed to it. They saw it as an anti-Semitic campaign, an anti-Semitic movement. You will discover that the rhetoric used or the discourse used by the founding fathers of Zionism is not much different from the discourse used by the initiators of the Crusades, by the creators of apartheid in South Africa, by the colonial authorities that imposed themselves on the Algerian people for 130 years. It's the same story, a story of a chosen people of God who were given license by God to kill, to maim, to rob, to destroy, to commit any sort of crime in order to fulfill an alleged divine promise. It's the same story. And this is actually what colonialism was based upon. There's a brilliant book by Michael Pryor called The Bible and Colonialism, in which he explains how the Bible, throughout the history of colonialism, was used in order to justify the dispossession of other peoples, even the annihilation of entire civilizations, as the white man of Europe did to the indigenous populations of what is today the Americas, or what is today New Zealand or Australia, etc. What the 7th of October has done, and we don't have all the time to go through the details of history, but I want to jump with you straight to the 7th of October. What the 7th of October has done and continues to be doing is draw the attention of the world, make people around the world curious about the background to this story. An old story, a long story, to many of them a boring story. It was turned into a very interesting thing. Out of curiosity, people wanted to know what was behind it, and this is now revealing itself in forms of a change in public opinion conviction. Recently, I read a post by an Australian lady, Mrs. Johnston. Her name is Mrs. Johnston. And actually, I was asked to translate it into Arabic. And when I translated it into Arabic, I really wept when I was translating it. And it's as if she was seeing in the Palestinians a beauty queen, something so beautiful, something so precious, something that the world should prevent others from killing, from annihilating. The way the Palestinians behaved among themselves, the way the Palestinians responded to the pain and the agony they were undergoing. To me, I saw in this a new development where people in the East, people in the West, people in the North, people in the South are being awakened from a long slumber by the sacrifices made by the people of Gaza. Of course, in contrast to what Mrs. Johnston wrote was an article published by The Economist, one of the most influential publications in the modern world, both political as well as economic, where the economist actually represents the opinion that the official establishment in the West doesn't want the general public to be exposed to. All the editorial board was worried about is what is likely to happen to Israel because of the miscalculations that Netanyahu was engaging in. That Israel is in danger, that these policies are likely to make it expand well beyond its ability to defend itself. And then what are we going to do about this? The Palestinians are completely absent. The children, the women, the men, the destruction, whatever, the burning, the Holocaust that the Palestinians are suffering today, as if none of this exists. What the economist wants to tell the world is that Israel is in danger and we need to do something about this. This is the official viewpoint in much of the Western circles. And hence is the current crisis in the United States of America, in academia, in universities, where students who by nature are supposed to ask questions, are supposed to inquire, to find out, to debate, are being silenced even by force. Grants are being withdrawn from students, from universities, a university like Columbia and others who rely at least partly on federal funding. That federal funding is being stopped in order to force them to force university managements to silence their students and to silence their staff. You saw what happened to the Turkish lady, the Turkish academic who was ambushed in public, kidnapped, almost kidnapped. And prior to that, the Palestinian students, and there are an increasing number of cases as well. Now, what is this indicative of? It is, to me, indicative of the horror that decision makers are sensing in the Western world, because their most beloved project, the project of Zionism, which is one of the last remaining colonial projects in modern history, is now in jeopardy, is now in danger. And who is causing that danger? It's these people of Gaza who alone are fighting for not their own survival, but actually for the survival of the Ummah. And that takes me to another point, which is, what does really Palestine mean to us as an Ummah? Is it just a regional issue or a local issue, or there is something more about it? If you read the history of the Zionist project, you have no choice but to come to the conclusion that Zionism is about keeping the Ummah crippled. Zionism was born as a political project. Of course, Zionism as an ideology existed for centuries in Europe. It goes all the way back to the Protestant movement, the emergence of the Protestant movement, the so-called the Reformation in Christianity, the ideas of Martin Luther and Calvin. But political Zionism, as is referred to, which is the movement among secular atheist Jews in Europe, was born out of the decline of the Ottoman Empire, the defeat even of the Ottoman Empire in the First World War. And Zionism as a colonial project is intended to prevent the Ummah from ever regaining its strength, from ever standing on its feet. And look at what Israel is doing at the moment. The moment there was a change in Syria, the moment Bashar was toppled, the Israelis immediately moved in to destroy whatever remained of a military infrastructure inside Syria. And until today, they continue to occupy parts of Syria and continue to kill Syrians every day, almost every day, realizing or understanding that the current regime is incapable of really doing much in terms of confronting such a formidable power supported by the United States of America and its allies in Europe. And look at the ties between the Arab dictators who suffocated the Arab democratic movement and their connection with the Israelis. Both the Israeli establishment and the governments in the Arab world that funded the coup in Egypt in 2013 and killed the dream of the Arabs in a better future for their children, actually they are in a coalition, they are in an alliance. Zionism is allied with the corrupt and despotic regimes in the Arab world that are impediments. They are formidable impediments to the revival of that part of the region. Today, in countries like Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Egypt, and to a lesser extent others in the region, tens of thousands of scholars, of intellectuals, of activists, of human rights defenders are languishing in prison because of this sustained campaign to undermine any attempt to revive that part of the Ummah. So actually, Zionism as a project, as a colonial project, is anti-Ummah, is not anti-Palestinian. Yes, my mother was thrown out of her house in Beersheba in 1948 and forced to become a refugee like hundreds of thousands of Palestinians. She was not the ultimate intended target. The ultimate intended target is Islam itself. And today we find this very close alliance between the extreme right wing in Europe and America and these same Arab regimes that destroyed the Arab dream of revival and that are also in alliance with Zionism. And this is another thing that seems to be contradiction in terms on the surface of it, where those who claim to be defenders of Islam and those who claim to be defenders of the Jews are in alliance with anti-Semites, with extreme right-wingers in Europe and in America, who are increasingly becoming more focused in their hostility to Islam than to Judaism. Of course, although of course inherently they are anti-Jewish. This is how it started. So governments, right-wing governments from Eastern Europe all the way to America today are part of this alliance. Today, Arab governments like that, those of Egypt, of Saudi Arabia, of the United Arab Emirates, fund extreme right-wing movements in Europe to attack Islam and the Muslims. They attack on our mosques in Europe, on our institutions, on our personalities. It's all carried out by organizations that are funded by Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates. So you need to look at the bigger picture. And those who fail to look at the bigger picture, either out of carelessness or out of ignorance or out of self-interest, eventually end up becoming part of this campaign against Islam and the Muslims. There are people, we come across people who say, oh, we don't want to anger the Saudis and the Emiratis. Dubai is a nice place. We go there and have some nice time. And or Saudi Arabia, we want to go to Umrah, we want to go to Hajj. We cannot speak against them. Yes, they are awful. They're corrupting the country. They're doing this, they're doing that. But it's better to remain quiet. We became silent. We remain silent. Our brothers and sisters who are in prison expect us to stand by them, to come to their support, to highlight their plight, and to speak against the tyrants who are oppressing them. But many of us have different self-interests that prevent them from joining that struggle. Our struggle is one and the same. Whether we're talking about liberating the Muslims of Kashmir from Indian, again, another fascist regime in India, or we're talking about the Uyghur in China, we're talking about the Rohingya in Burma, wherever you talk, our pain is one and the same, and it is the result of centuries of decline and also the result of an orchestrated campaign to prevent the Ummah from coming back. But inshallah, the Ummah will come back and people in the future will remember those who have given their lives, whether in Egypt or in Tunisia or in Gaza or in the West Bank or in Kashmir or elsewhere, those who have given their lives for this cause, the cause of revival, they will remember them as we do remember today some of our heroes in the distant past. Jazakumullah khair. Thank you very much.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم I'd like to thank the organizers first. Less so you, Brother Ahsan, more so Sister Maryam Fatima. It's been a while since I've met Dr. Azzam Tamimi. I was catching up with him after 21 years. He knew my father. They were of a particular group of people, Ustaz Kamal, yourself, Sheikh Rashid al-Ghanouchi. I mention them because even though I'm supposed to speak about Kashmir, we have to recognize the difference in age. I'm only here because I stand on shoulders like his, on those that came before us. They sacrificed a lot, they worked a lot, that allowed people like myself to be here today to be with you and speak about Kashmir. Not everybody knows Kashmir very well. India have tried to show that Kashmir is presented through their version of Indianness, be it through Bollywood, be it through the angle of Gandhi, or through the angle of terrorism. But if we look at how Kashmir came about, if you're familiar with the partition of the subcontinent, when India became its own country and Pakistan was formed, the Muslim majority nations were supposed to go with Pakistan, Kashmir was one of them, and the Hindu nations were supposed to go with India. India did not tolerate that decision. When Kashmiris naturally were supposed to go with Pakistan, they decided to occupy Kashmir in 1947, October the 27th. Since then, we've been occupied. The issue of Kashmir was taken to the United Nations by India when Pakistan tried to liberate the people. The United Nations said that the people of Kashmir should be given the right to self-determination. It's in the Security Council resolutions. India agreed. Of course, Pakistan did as well. But India reneged on that decision. And since then, they've continued to occupy, subjugate, oppress the people of Kashmir. Now, I could go on and on about the history lessons, about Nehru's promise, about the Security Council resolutions and their technical details of what needs to be done before a referendum can happen in Kashmir, but that's not relevant. What's relevant is to understand that the violations that happen on the people of Kashmir are no less than war crimes, crimes against humanity, ethnic cleansing, and genocide. And now we see settler colonization and demographic change. And you hear these terms and you think these are just terms. My Palestinian, I can't say friend, I can say my uncle, knows this all too well. Settler colonization, they're witnessing it in their lifetimes. It's not a historical thing. Demographic change. The genocide, we've all witnessed it, live streamed on social media. Now, irrespective of what the law says in the United Nations resolutions and the Geneva Conventions, the truth is that it's a disputed territory. Kashmir is a disputed territory between India and Pakistan. Now, whenever Pakistan wants to negotiate with India, India says that when the international community says to India that you need to fix this issue, India says that this is a bilateral issue between India and Pakistan. When Pakistan says, come on, let's have a talk about Kashmir, India says this is an internal issue. And when Kashmiris want to have a talk with India to find a solution, India says there is no issue at all. So what are we left with? Since 1947, I've mentioned, we've had human rights atrocities that can only be described as an apocalypse, genuinely like an apocalypse. Human shields, enforced disappearances, mass graves, torture centers. You have the use of pellets on children as young as 18 months. You have the several torture centers where people who were tortured people that were living in the vicinity of those torture centers describe those voices as screams, obviously. But since those torture centers have been closed down, people that are still living there swear they can still hear the screams of people in those torture centers. Now, what is it that India wants from us? I mean, nobody really wants to just kill a person for no reason. Even the Hindus, even I can't believe that they're so radically horrible and evil that they just want to eliminate people. The truth is, whether people understood this in the past or not, but right now what you need to understand is this is a war against Islam and against Muslims and against the Muslim identity. That's all it is. We just happen to be the victim in this. Now, people will talk about geostrategic positioning, the fact that Kashmir controls a lot of the water and a lot of the hydroelectric power potential that exists, strategic defense, strategic positioning between Afghanistan, Russia, China, India, Pakistan. We're very important in that. That's all very good and nice to say, but the reality is, in the same way that the Zionists have their own vision and their own agenda, the Hindutva ideology is exactly the same. Hindutva, where does Hindutva actually come from? What is the political ideology of that? Where does it stem from? It stems from Nazi Germany. They modeled themselves based on the Nazis. Their leadership even went and met with the Nazi leadership when they were still around. Literature, the ideology, the philosophy, the salute, the uniform, all modeled on Nazi Germany. Now, you may find it hard to believe, but those people that align themselves with Nazi Germany today align themselves with Zionists. Modi and Netanyahu have a very strange romance. I use this word purposefully because if you ever see them together, wallahi, it looks like a strange relationship. It is as strange a relationship as it is economically, militarily, and in their war crimes against the people of Kashmir and the Palestinians. Now, often what happens is, because we consider ourselves to be a forgotten conflict or one that is lesser known, often what happens, I'm guilty of this, is that we drag ourselves towards the Palestinians, we start comparing and say, look, we have the same issue. The Palestinians know this. The Palestinians have always been supporting the Kashmir cause. I know this personally because I've been raised among giants like Dr. Azzam Tamimi and others. They know what it is. They've supported it their whole lives. The issue is not about the people right now. We know what we're going through. You know what we're going through. Hopefully you will. Recognize that the oppressor is the same as well. Recognize that Zionism and Hindutva are two sides of the same coin. They both have expansionist ideologies. They both believe in a superior race. And they both are after the identity of Muslims, or rather the eradication of the Muslim identity. Zionism believes in beyond its own borders, let alone taking over Palestinian territory. They believe that even parts of Jordan and Lebanon, even Saudi Arabia belongs to them. Look at their maps. I'm sure you already know this, right? I'm not teaching you anything new. Look at the Hindutva map, the Zionist Hindutva map. Not only do they believe in being a superior race and eliminating the Muslims and minorities within India, they believe that Bangladesh belongs to them, Sri Lanka belongs to them, Pakistan belongs to them, Burma belongs to them, Nepal belongs to them, Afghanistan belongs to them, Iran belongs to them, and even Saudi Arabia belongs to them. To the extent that the Holy Kaaba in Mecca is called the Makeshwar Mahadev Temple. Now, some people may find it ludicrous to think that India is not going to take over the Holy Kaaba. But I remind you, that's exactly what people used to say about Palestine. And they're not going to do that. They're not going to take over Jerusalem. They're not going to take over Gaza. They're not going to turn it into a genocide camp. No, that's never going to happen. Until it did. Until you don't find the Palestinians there anymore. Until now you're going to see only settlers. So when you hear that India wants to go as far as the Holy Kaaba, are you telling me that you don't believe that the Zionists want the same thing? Are you telling me that's not possible? Of course, you know that it's possible. You know the influence that the Zionists have in the Middle East and far beyond that. The difference is this, and I argue this, and it's for the sake of saying it, but I also believe it to some level, that fundamentally Zionism has failed and Hindutva has succeeded. And I'll tell you why. Over the last 14, 15, 16 months, whatever propaganda the Israelis and the Zionists tried to push out into the world was countered twice as fast by the Joe public, by yourselves. Not by institutions, not by news stations, not by nation states, but by individuals like yourselves, who immediately countered that propaganda twice as fast and twice as hard. In Kashmir, children as young as 18-month-old Hibba, who was blinded in one eye, are not noticed, despite being on the front page or the second or third page of the New York Times newspaper, but still, you won't really hear about it. Or Insha Malik, that was on nearly every cover of mainstream newspapers, including Amnesty International, who used her as a front page cover of their report, the blindings in Kashmir. But you won't really hear about what's going on inside Kashmir in regards to the blindings. Or for that matter, the human shields that have been used. Young children use the human shields. Or for that matter, children like Samir Rah, Wamik Farouk, Tufail Matu, some children had tear gas canister shot in their head, making them paralyzed. One of those children's name was Yawar, who today is semi-paralyzed, can't speak, but the only thing he can say is Azadi, which means freedom, when you ask him what he wants. Or another child that was picked up, tortured by the Indian army, child, I'm talking about not even a teenager. And when his body was found, he was killed. But how was he killed? His throat was crushed because the military stomped on his neck, killing him. Other children had batons, those rods that are used to beat civilians out of the, maybe you have it here as well, that they're used to beat civilians by the police to get out of the way. It was shoved down his throat so hard and so far it broke his back teeth. Torture centers where people like Qalandar had both his legs amputated and then force-fed his own flesh. How many case studies do you want to hear about in regards to Kashmir? Now, this is the reality of Kashmir. Widows and orphans, hundreds of thousands. We have something, recently I did a podcast with somebody and I mentioned half widows, women that don't know where their husbands are because they've been enforcibly disappeared. Now, whatever the fatwa is, but try and explain that to a woman that yes, you should go and get married again while your husband is still missing and your children still think that they have a father who's gone away for a little while. How do you explain that to the people of Kashmir? How do you explain to them that the world community does not look towards you, despite being a frontline defender on the war on Islam? That war on the Muslim identity in Kashmir is not just through guns and pellets and tanks and missiles. It is through the degradation of our culture, heritage, history, society, and family ties. In India, they have the Khalistan movement. The Sikh people, they want to liberate themselves from India. And the back of that Khalistan movement was broken by the introduction of alcohol, drugs, and prostitution. I think it was Salahuddin Ayyubi that said that if you want to break the back of a society, bring these things into society. That's exactly now what they've tried to do inside Kashmir. There was a time there was only one place where you could buy alcohol in Kashmir, and nobody knew about it except tourists, and it was covered, so nobody ever actually saw it. Now, it's pretty much everywhere. And you can see alcohol being on the floor, these empty bottles. Drugs in Kashmir, at the most it was marijuana and nobody really knew what it was. Now you see heroin needles everywhere. Prostitution, they're running the state-sponsored terror. Fine, that's one thing. State-sponsored prostitution inside Kashmir. And there's nothing that anybody can do about it. Because the moment you speak out against it, you get put in jail. Literally, for speaking against immoral activities inside Kashmir. I'm not even talking about occupation anymore. Just immoral activities. So you can only imagine what happens to a person. Many Kashmiris are here today as well. You can only imagine what would happen to them if they speak about Kashmir, living inside Kashmir. Everything is monitored, be it WhatsApp, your email, your telephone, and even if you think it's encrypted, nothing is encrypted inside Kashmir. I think pretty much everybody knows this now, that WhatsApp is no longer encrypted. Nothing is encrypted. All those safety nets that people had that you can't be doxxed, you can't be found out, no. It doesn't, maybe in the US and in Germany and in France and these places, you might have some level of security, but not for the Palestinians and certainly not for the people of Kashmir. Everything is monitored. And that's for the people inside Kashmir. Now, for those that are living outside of Kashmir, maybe you know a few Kashmiris, but you don't really hear stories from them, or you don't hear about Kashmiris from Kashmir. And there's a reason for that. Because immediately what happens is their families back home get tortured or assassinated. I'm not going to speak on behalf of anybody because I don't want to expose anyone. I'll just speak about myself. During Ramadan, an Indian news channel highlighted me for doing something in the United Nations. The next day, my family members were picked up from their homes and tortured. Some are still arrested. Some have been arrested for 5 years and still counting because of me. Just because I said something in the United Nations, because I speak out. That's the consequence of speaking out for the people of Kashmir. And that's on our own people. Now, I don't want to drag this on and make you feel guilty, although I really do want to make you feel guilty. Simply because, for one reason, only one reason I want to make you feel guilty. We call ourselves the Muslim Ummah. And I'm in a conference with Ummatics. So I ask you to prove yourselves as part of the Ummah. Genuinely, I ask this from you. Because we've seen what Muslims have suffered through for many years. Be it the Palestinians, the Rohingya, people of Syria, people of Kashmir. I can't offer you a solution of what you can do for the people of Kashmir. I can only tell you what the realities are. I can only tell you about the murders and the disappearances and the assassinations that India performs on us. What you can do is you can tell Dr. Azzam, myself, or anybody else that is suffering in the Ummah, that what you can do for them. I don't presume to know what the solutions are. I mean, I think that I do, but it is not within my power to enforce some kind of result. What we can do is find out what your skill sets are. What are you prepared to do to solve these issues around the Muslim world? Not just for Kashmir, not just for Palestine, but generally speaking. What can you do? What is within your skill set? What is within your power? What is within your ambit? And then utilize it. Because there's one thing that I've learned is that your time is very valuable. A lot of the times what happens is people throw money at an issue and they think that that's going to solve it. Money isn't going to bring you solutions. Time, effort, these things bring solutions. And one of the most important things for the people of Kashmir right now is the information that needs to get out there. Information exists. It just isn't being disseminated fast enough. It isn't being absorbed by the common people. People don't understand it the way that they understand any other conflict. And I repeat again that this is a war on the same way that there is a war on Islam in Palestine. the same way there is a war in Islam with the people of the Rohingya, the same there is a war in Islam with the people of Kashmir. India do not want Islam to succeed. They want to create a pan-Hindu nation called Akhand Bharat that goes beyond their own borders. They believe they are the Aryan race, and they want to stretch all the way up to Saudi Arabia to create that nation. Sometimes if you look at the maps between the Zionists and the Hindutva, you can see where they've created a line of demarcation where the Zionists have this much and the Hindus have this much. And I keep on repeating Hindutva, 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 because you understand Zionism, Zionism, Zionism. If you understand Zionism, there is no reason you can't understand Hindutva, radical Hindutva. And the same way that you have Jews that are excellent and nice people that are supporting the Palestinians, they're not Zionists. In the same way, they may be excellent, nice Hindus and Indians, doesn't mean that they're not Hindutva. There is a distinction to be made, and we make sure, and I hope that you'll be able to make it. More than that, remember the people of Kashmir, the same way that you remember other people around the world. There used to be a time where I used to ask people, at least the least that you can do is put Kashmir in your du'as. That's the least you can do. I don't think that's fair anymore. I think we've gone to a stage, and it's you people that have done it, that you have shown that what you can do. You have proven that you can debunk propaganda. You have proven that you can come to the streets and protest. You've proven that you can create information and literature and publicize it. You can create graphics and videos. You did it for all of these causes over the last 5 to 10 years. A little bit for Kashmir. Just a little bit. Only for one reason. Because one of these days, often I am asked this question, and I'm sure some of the Kashmiris here are going to ask me the same thing, that, what have you done so far? I don't want to be in a position where tomorrow an oppressed Kashmiri somehow manages to call me or meet me somewhere, and he holds me by my neck, and he says to me, you were there to represent us, and you went to Turkey, you went to Malaysia, you went to this place and that place, you traveled the world wearing a nice suit and a nice shirt, and you went on airplanes, and what did you do for me? That is what I'm afraid of. I'm answerable. And now that I've given you people the knowledge, now you're answerable. There's a word in Arabic that I refrain from using, even though I used to use it many years ago, because I understood the depth, the heaviness, the weight of it, which is hypocrite. In English, it's called hypocrite. In Arabic, I don't dare to use that word because it takes you out of the fold of Islam. You have the knowledge, you have here's another issue. People will say that we don't know enough about Kashmir. You don't believe the BBC, do you? You don't believe Fox News, do you? You don't believe CNN, do you? So if you don't take information from them when it comes to what's happening around the Muslim world, there is no excuse for you not to know about Kashmir. The same way you do your research for all of these other causes, you do the same research for the people of Kashmir. I keep on reminding you about action simply because of this. Knowledge is not enough anymore. When I hear the Palestinian mothers and sisters and brothers and daughters screaming out on Eid Day that how dare you wear nice clothes when we are wearing our shrouds, that makes me weep. It makes me want to do something, do some form of action. So once you have that knowledge, I'm giving you maybe a speck, a grain of sand of knowledge, because the rest is up to you. It's your responsibility to acquire that knowledge, find out what the cruxes of the issues are. I've given you a basic understanding, whatever I can do within a limited amount of time, and then go out into the world, advocate for the resolution of the Kashmir conflict. How? By asking the people of Kashmir what they want. It's really that simple. You want to find out what a solution is? You ask the Palestinians, you ask the Rohingya, you ask the Syrians who then acted and got what they wanted. And you also ask the people of Kashmir. I don't think I want to take much more of your time because I understand that we are limited and I don't want to speak more than Dr. Azzam. I don't have that right. Assalamu alaikum.